It's time for another edition of the Improbability Engine. I'm Will Aubrey, and joining me is my buddy Joe Darnell. And as always, we start with our moment of what?
Yeah, and mine's actually going to be pretty close to home. It was announced over the summer that Murray State would be investing $1.9 million in some upgrades that included some things that happened over at Roy Stewart Stadium, the home of the football racers. I didn't know what all they were going to be. You know what I mean? That's a big number. What does that mean? I have to tell you, anybody who gets a chance to look and see what they've done, holy cow, it's incredible. I drove by. They've got the new video scoreboard that's beautiful. It's gigantic. It's fantastic. They've got signage up. Everything looks brand new. It's amazing what they've done. I drove by and went, what? I didn't realize they were doing all that. That was my moment of what to start off this week was Roy Stewart Stadium upgrades. I was just flabbergasted.
It almost makes you think that the Missouri Valley transition is still on the table and that this is part of their plan to join the Valley next year.
From your lips to God's ear. It would be fantastic. And let's be for real. These were needed upgrades. The playing surface is fantastic. It has been since they put the new one in. They took out the old turf. They've got the new field turf in. It's wonderful. It looks good. It plays really well. The seating in the stadium is great. I mean, it's totally fine. Everything looks clean and new. But they've needed that scoreboard update. They've needed the superficial stuff that they've gone through and done. And quite frankly, they needed new lights. And these new LED lights are going to be a game changer. These are fantastic. You and I have both sat up at the top of Stewart Stadium and tried to pick out numbers. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, to the point where you just kind of go, and there's some guy whose number starts with a 2. It could be 2, 20, 24, 20. I don't know. Will, you got it? I don't know. We've been there. Those lights are going to be a game changer. That's going to be fantastic. And they're LED, so they're going to save money. So that's always a positive. But really impressed with the work that they've done over there. And God, I hope that we can get that Missouri Valley Conference invite. That would be fantastic.
I don't want to go into the details of how it happened. But here's my moment of what. I find out from Twitter that, oh, by the way, Callaway County High School's football team does not open the season on August the 18th, the way the schedule indicated. They're only going to play 9 games. So, like I said, I don't want to talk about why or who's responsible or anything like that. But when
it's Will's fault.
Absolutely not. But when I discovered it, I was like, you got to be kidding me. So anyway, moving right along.
Well, and that kind of segues really well into what we want to talk about, which is the state of sports in America. Now, you and I are college guys. We love watching college sports of all kinds. Now, we have our other dalliances with other sports. You are a big horse racing fan.
Yes.
I like watching soccer. We have our own spheres that we follow. But the one that intersects the most, besides high school sports, is college sports. And what I wanted to talk about on this show was really just to try to understand what's going on with the current makeup of sports in America. And so, I mean, we'll just start with a quick background. Everybody knows the sport that seems to be driving the bus right now at the professional and collegiate level, and even to some extent the high school level, is football. Football is the straw that stirs the drink. It's a billion-dollar, nonprofit enterprise at the NFL level, and it is a major moneymaker for the NCAA. And honestly, we talked about the MVC whenever we were opening the show in our moment of what, and we talked about conference realignment many times throughout this podcast. One of the things that is the biggest driver for conference realignment has been football. Now, that's not to say that every move was a football move, but football has driven conference realignment.
It truly has. Now, with regard to the Missouri Valley Conference and Murray State's possible move to the MVC, I started to say it's irrelevant. It's almost irrelevant. I don't really think that it's that significant a part of the process because the Missouri Valley Conference is not a football conference. Now, they do have a Missouri Valley Football Conference that is not connected to the Missouri Valley Conference, except that
where it's connected to the Missouri Valley
except
Football Conference.
that the commissioner is also part of the administration of the Missouri Valley Conference, and it's run out of the same offices, I believe.
Which is okay. That awkward kind of pseudo relationship aside, you're right. The Missouri Valley Conference didn't come looking for Murray State because of Murray State's football prowess. I think we can all agree that that's the case. And nor did the American Athletic go looking for Wichita State because of their football team, because they don't have football anymore. But things have been shifting that direction. All you have to do is look at the Big 12, which has 4 teams from Texas and West Virginia.
Well, and look at this, which it's mind-boggling to me. And when I saw it the first time about 5 years ago, I was like, well, this can't be true. University of Louisville and the University of Kentucky, okay? Louisville dominates the football series. Kentucky has dominated the basketball series between the two.
And both have had seasons of ups and downs on either side.
Now, who would you guess makes more money in football? It's Kentucky. Okay? Who would you guess makes more money in basketball? It's Louisville. So the money just, it doesn't fall quite the way you suspect. And there's so much more money in football that it just dwarfs what basketball makes at most schools.
Yeah, and I think the biggest issue that has been the number one driver as it comes to that, when we talk about money, is conference affiliation. You put Kentucky, which is arguably the worst team historically in the Southeastern Conference. I think that's fair to say. I think it's them and Vanderbilt, and really, it's a pillow fight for the bottom.
That's right.
Versus Louisville now being in the ACC, which is an extremely tough basketball conference. Probably the toughest year in and year out basketball conference in the country.
Agreed.
I think that's just, you can make arguments for the Big East, you can make Big Ten maybe. The ACC is year in, year out the toughest conference for basketball. So when you look at, Louisville's making more money in basketball, I think it's less to do with Louisville and more to do with their conference affiliation.
Well, actually, with Louisville, this was the case before they joined the ACC, and what was driving it was luxury box sales at the Yum Center. That's what that was all about. And Kentucky plays in a rather antiquated arena that does not have the luxury box facilities that you find at places like the Yum Center, and as a result, they weren't making nearly the money off of it. As I recall, and I'm old, so I may not have the numbers exactly right, but as I recall, Louisville's profit on basketball was in the neighborhood of $25 million a year, and it was driven by the luxury box sales.
Yeah, and
now football. As you rightly point out, that's really linked to conference affiliation because you can be the worst team in the SEC, and because you get a distribution from the conference office of several million dollars, you can still make money off of it.
Absolutely. And here's the thing with football as well. You're fitting 73,000 people into Commonwealth Stadium, and they sell that out a lot. Now, is it all driven by Kentucky fans? No. If they're playing Alabama and Lexington, Alabama will buy their allotment and then some. If they're playing Tennessee and Lexington, Tennessee's going to buy their allotment and then some. That's just how that works. You're playing in a high demand area, and people will flock to where they can get tickets.
And it's not that Kentucky fans don't want to win. They want their football team to win, but they're going to come out regardless because it's a social event.
Absolutely. Yeah, everybody what is it, the what they do in Lexington game days that align correctly is they go to Keeneland and then they pick up the football game too. So it's one of those where that's not out of the question. But now here's where it gets interesting. Where those top programs are making money hand over fist, what does that do for these lower level programs? And I'm not even talking about at the FCS level. I'm talking about at the FBS level, the Sun Belts and the Conference USAs. Well, if news articles here in the past few months are to be believed, they're losing money every single year, and not a little bit of money. They're losing millions of dollars every single year being, in the FBS. Even the teams that are good lose money by going to bowl games. Now, bowl games are supposed to be the point where, hey, you've had a great year. Let's go celebrate this. We're going to go and play a team from out of the conference that, hey, this is going to be our day. We're going to have a day where we're going to be on television playing in a beautiful location. Let's go do this. And they're losing money on it. I don't understand how that's sustainable.
Well, at the FCS level, definitely almost everybody loses money. I remember talking to the head coach at Jacksonville State here several years ago.
Jacksonville State, a dominant FCS program. They're one of the top 10 in the country, I would say.
And he was telling me that FCS just does not make financial sense. He said, if we went to, say, Conference USA,
yeah,
instead of getting paid $300,000 to go play a game at Tennessee, we get paid $1 million to go play a game at Tennessee.
3 times.
He says that the economics of it at the FCS level just don't make any sense.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And I think that's the biggest driver. But now here's the problem. Once you get to that level, it's an arms race. You're in an arms race at that point. You go from FCS to FBS, yeah, you're getting paid $1 million to play on the road. But you've got, twice as many scholarships? You've got some number that costs twice as much.
You've got about 30 more scholarships.
30 more scholarships. They're all full scholarships at the FBS level. You have to have upgraded facilities. And not just a stadium, because Burgess Snow in Jacksonville, that's Sunbelt quality.
Well, you also have to average, and the number used to be 19,000.
Right.
You had to average 19,000 in attendance. I think they may have increased that to 25,000. I'm not 100% sure about that. But you have to meet certain attendance requirements, and what that frequently results in is schools selling a bunch of tickets for $1 a piece, just to make sure that they're going to meet the attendance requirement.
Absolutely. And what you'll also find is that these schools are starting to implement, and it's something that has not been done at Murray State that I know of, an athletics fee.
Yes.
A Division I athletics fee. Western
does
Kentucky
it.
has that. I'm pretty sure that a lot of the schools at that level have an athletics fee. What that does is that goes straight to the bottom line of the athletic department. That's a direct subsidy from students. And in an era of booming, out of control student debt, it becomes less defensible every time I hear about it, to be honest with you. Why are they putting themselves in debt to subsidize a program that loses money? And can't help but lose money, and keeps losing money, even when they're good, even when they're winning, even when they're undefeated for most of a season and they go to a bowl game and they're being talked about. If they still lose money, at what point does that happen? So that's one side of it, is the financial side of football. But there's something else that's going on in football here in the past 5 or 6 years or so. And that's the idea that football is inherently dangerous. Now, putting it out like that, you go, well, yeah, it's a contact sport. I mean, I believe you did a story for WKMS not too long ago that talked about there's an inherent danger in a contact sport. That's a normal, reasonable thing to have. What isn't being said is how dangerous. We're not talking, broken bones, knee injuries, stuff like that, which are bad enough. But now we have the looming specter of CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I remembered it. So you have this where, yeah, you can play, but, and not only are you going to have physical ailments like, it's tough for me to get up, my knees hurt, my back hurts, my elbows hurt.
But
now there's going to be brain damage. You're going to develop Alzheimer's.
But if you've got your choice between chronic traumatic encephalopathy and bovine spongiform encephalopathy, I think you're going to choose CTE.
I don't know, because you die in both. So I don't really want either one, to be really honest with you. No, the biggest issue that I have with it is this overwhelming evidence that keeps showing up, and it won't go away. You've got $1 billion industry that is desperately trying to tamp down all these fears, and it just keeps coming back.
Now, one might think that this would be a reason for increased participation in soccer as opposed to football. But I've seen all kinds of things about CTE in soccer.
Yeah, CTE it's not exclusive. The difference between CTE in soccer and CTE in football is sheer numbers. I mean, and I'm not talking about numbers of participants. I'm talking about numbers of concussive issues. You look at the line in a football game, those people have concussive head injuries every game. Now, are they large enough to be scoped out? Probably not. But they happen, and they happen over and over and over again. And the thing that makes CTE dangerous, at this point, we still don't know everything there is to know about it. This could all be bunk. I mean, at this point, it could all just fall away and turn into something else. But what the research is showing is that it's not the big bell-rung incidents. It's the small, repeated, concussive injuries over and over and over again. And the damage it does to somebody in their 40s and 50s. You know, we're not talking about, well, when you turn 80, it'll be hard to get out of bed. Well, you know what? I was going to turn 80 and it was probably going to be hard to get out of bed anyway. We're talking about people who should be in the primes of their lives, you know, who've been professional athletes, who've taken care of themselves to play the game, who are unable to function anymore. And it's starting to seem to have an impact.
So where do you see this leading?
Well, I think what you're going to find is there are going to be some people who play football regardless. They want to play. They see it as their only way out. They love the game. There's so many individual reasons for that. But I think we're already starting to see some things happen. What do you have on that?
Well, this is only tangentially related. But it's funny.
Right, okay.
We don't cut funny, right?
We don't cut funny. You never cut funny.
So I've been invited to play on a girls' flag football team. And
really?
I said, wait a minute. It's a girls' team. How am I going to get to play? And
they'll take it easy on you.
And this is what I was told. Well, the guys' teams have to have at least 2 girls. So I'm sure the girls' teams will be required to have guys. And I said, well, I really don't think it works that way. But and I don't think there's any way they're going to let you do this. But I'm willing to play. I think it would be a lot of fun. So I told my friend Becky about this.
Yep.
And she said, and Marilyn doesn't care? I said, no. She said, she must not have a jealous bone anywhere in her body.
Well, I think it's abundantly clear that your wife is a saint.
Clear.
First and foremost.
Yes. I mean, she's put up with me for almost 40 years.
Which is more than enough for beatification. I mean that's the threshold.
7 years and you were done.
Right, yeah. Well, you know, once I started drinking heavily, I started saying, okay, this might not be something that's worth it. Although it was chocolate milk, in all honesty. I just drank a lot of chocolate milk, which gives you a bloaty feeling, which is not positive. No, I think the biggest issue that we've got with football and in the future of football is participation. You know, Bleacher Report just came out with a story that talked about a 2.4% drop in high school football participation year over year from last season. Now, you can explain that away as, you know what, fluctuations in demographics. There are numerous ways you can spin that and say, yeah, but it's not a big deal. Maybe it's just a blip. Next year it'll be up 7%, and actually the net is plus 5. But they further go into it, and they say, well, in California is a hotbed for high school football. It's a hotbed for junior college football, and it's a hotbed for high major football with UCLA, USC, Cal Berkeley. That's before you even get into some of the other schools that are in there that might be good at their level. In California, high school participation dropped by 3.12% last season. Again, you can explain that away as a demographic shift. The problem is it's down 10% over the last decade. That's harder to explain away. And I don't know what percentage of that is, well, I'm not really into football, or how much is, you know what, I really don't want to get hurt like that.
And that could affect things, there's no doubt. The decline in youth participation in baseball is even more alarming if you're a baseball fan, because it's like half what it was 10 to 15 years ago. Now, baseball remains popular. Major League Baseball remains popular regionally.
Yeah.
But it's not popular nationally. And if you look at a list of people's 50 favorite athletes, you won't find a baseball player on there.
Yeah, and that's a big change. I mean, the issue that you're seeing there, and when you talk about baseball, I think baseball is being propped up by participation rates in Canada or Central America, or the Caribbean, Japan, Korea. These are areas that are seeing an explosion in Major League Baseball players from that area. Now, the first wave was Mexico and the Caribbean, to be honest with you. I mean, you had your Dominican players, your Puerto Rican players, your Mexican players that came in and were immediately really good. You know, you have a bunch of guys who were fantastic Cuban players, and you start developing these teams that do that. And it's gone through the Caribbean area, Central and Northern South America, to Venezuela and Colombia and stuff like that. I think what you're seeing now is you're actually seeing Major League Baseball's participation rates being inflated by players outside the United States. You're seeing more Koreans in Major League Baseball, more Japanese players in Major League Baseball, where 20, 25 years ago, that was a novelty. That just didn't happen. And so maybe that's where the participation rates are not going to be as causing as much of a precipitous decline for baseball compared to football. Football is really drawing from two countries.
Horse racing continues to be extremely popular on big days.
Yes.
Derby Day, Belmont Stakes Day, when the Triple Crown races are being held,
Absolutely.
The attendance at tracks is through the roof. I mean, you get 170,000 people coming to the Kentucky Derby. That's, you know...
And that's not counting the millions who watch
absolutely
worldwide.
Right. Now, nationwide, though, what you have found is that a lot of tracks have closed.
Yep.
And the tracks that have not closed, although the handle at those tracks has gone up, in other words, the amount of money bet has gone up, attendance on non-special event days has gone down. Whereas you might have had 30 or 40 years ago, 5,000 people at a particular track on an afternoon in the summer. Now maybe it's 600, and everybody else is betting online.
Yeah, and I think you can say the same thing with boxing. Boxing has seen special interest boxing, the single bouts, the heavyweight or light heavyweight or bantamweight championships, those individually will have spikes, and I think there's a huge amount of money to be made there, especially from pay-per-view. But what you don't see is a wholesale increase in boxing participation or interest even.
They don't have fights, or at least very few, on TV anymore, and as a result, you don't get to know the fighters,
right.
and so you can't really follow them. Now, MMA is different. They have their fights on regular
Absolutely.
TV, and so you get to know the fighters. I despise MMA, and I'm convinced that, you know, when Floyd Mayweather finishes with Conor McGregor, that McGregor's going to be hurt. But
and we'll see. I think that's the biggest. I think what we're seeing now is the biggest problem with boxing is that it's driven by gambling. All the watch rates, all of it's driven by gambling. At this point, nobody thinks Conor McGregor has a shot to win.
Well,
the
and
fight.
the NFL is driven by gambling.
It is. That's true.
You know, surprisingly, we've seen a dramatic and rapid decline in the influence of same-day fantasy.
Yeah.
But it's
Well, and a lot of that is you just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it's illegal in some states, and some states it's legal, and is it okay if I'm doing it from here, but they're based out of here? That is more of a question of, all right, who's in charge of the regulations of this? What regulations are there going to be? It's killing our investment, which in turn hurts our ability to go in there. But when we talk about football, participation is not just a problem from the grassroots coming up. It's not attrition in the high school ranks, but it's also attrition at the upper level. 34 NFL players under 30 have retired in the past 2 years.
Yeah.
Now, you could argue and say, well, some of those guys were going to get cut, and so they just retired, or they really never had much. We're talking about 34 players under the age of 30. These guys are, if they're going to have a football career, that's when you have a football career is in your 20s. Now, that you don't have a long career ever in football, but that time frame is where people actually make their money, and we're seeing more people do that. And honestly, it's stuff like the Jim Plunkett story. I don't know if you've heard this. Jim Plunkett, Heisman Trophy winner, fantastic quarterback, Super Bowl winner. I mean, he's one of those guys that if you're of a certain age, Will, you probably watched Jim Plunkett play.
I was not a fan.
You're not a fan of Jim Plunkett. Well,
although I was kind of a fan at Stanford.
Okay, I can appreciate
when he was at Stanford. I can actually remember the name of one of his receivers, Randy Vitaha. But when he went to play for the Raiders, not a fan.
Not a fan. So you're not a Raider Nation guy, but still one of the better quarterbacks of his era, Hall of Fame quarterback in his own right.
He was all right.
He was all right. Okay, well, he's come out here recently, and somebody did an interview with him, and he talked about, life sucks. His life sucks. He's taking, huge amount of medication. He can't make it out of bed. He's physically, and this is non-CTE. This isn't, brain injuries. These are just the physical ailments that come with playing a lifetime in a sport where 300-pound guys are paid to hurt you.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. So you're seeing that. And honestly, when the questions are posed to professional players, you get both sides. You get, you know what? I'm a football player. I'm gonna go until I can't go anymore. It's a gift to be out here doing this. This is what I've always dreamt of doing. This is my hope. And then you get guys like Martellus Bennett, who says, I ain't dying for this. And that's the question you have to ask is there a sport that's worth dying for? Because this is the question that football has to face. And you're looking at soccer. You brought up soccer. I just want to point this out. Tennessee, not what you would call a historic soccer hotbed. Right? I wouldn't call it a historic soccer hotbed. Atlanta, Georgia, soccer hotbed. Probably not. Currently, the two records for the highest attendance at a soccer game in the state of Tennessee are from this year. Number 2, 47,622 U.S. versus Panama in the Gold Cup. First game. I was at that game. There was 47,000 people there. I didn't count them all. I'm willing to give 622 one way or the other. But they were there. The other game, 56,232 people went and saw a preseason match between Manchester City and Tottenham. Again, I went and saw that. There were a lot of people there.
Wait a minute. 2 English soccer teams playing in Tennessee?
Yep, and they drew 56,000 people plus.
What the Zark?
This is what I'm saying. This is what soccer has done now. Now, before you say, well, those are one-offs, that maybe it was just a big kind of a hype, or maybe there was a good machine there.
Not going to say that. I've been astonished by the attendance at the Louisville minor league soccer team.
Absolutely, yeah, the USL team, Louisville City, one of the better teams in the USL, and honestly, they pack them in. And Louisville does not have a history of huge soccer fandom.
Because it's a great city.
It's a great city, but now it loves soccer. So is it still a great city? Or is it now becoming a great city because it loves soccer? I'll let you ponder that one off air. But let's think about it like this. One of the newest MLS franchises in the country is Atlanta United. Atlanta United, based in Atlanta. Soccer team in Atlanta. They're averaging 46,482 people per game to watch soccer in Atlanta, in Bobby Dodd Field, at Georgia Tech.
Now,
it's not like they're playing in the Georgia Dome or something like that. They will be, but at this point they're playing in a college football stadium, and they're averaging 46,000 people, Will.
I was at a Murray State women's soccer game in the OVC tournament.
If you say 46,000 people were there, I'm calling BS. I'm just saying.
And so I get a phone call from my son.
Mm-hmm.
What you doing? I'm at a women's soccer game. Nothing's happening. And
You know what?
And when I did that, our buddy Ed Marlowe threw his phone in the air. So I can still make people throw their phones in the
You know
air.
what? I don't think this goes back to your wife being a saint, Will. She is a saint. She has not been beatified yet, but by God, she has met the criteria. We're just waiting for a phone call from the Vatican. It's going to happen. But if we look at what's going on, you know, MLS soccer is expanding, looking at expanding in Nashville and Cincinnati and Sacramento. Miami is involved. I mean, you're watching this. You're seeing a shift, and I don't know what's going to happen next. Although it looks like at this point, football may have reached its peak and may be on that downward slide. Not to say that it won't be the number one sport for the next 20 years, but maybe we've seen that zenith that baseball saw back in the 80s, or boxing saw probably in the late 70s. Horse racing saw, what, in the 60s, 70s, 80s? When was the peak for horse racing?
God, who knows?
I mean, it's one of those where maybe
The peak
Secretariat.
for horse racing may have been in the 40s.
Very well true.
The 30s and 40s.
Yeah, absolutely
Because
true.
people would listen to the races on the radio.
Absolutely.
And they'd gather around radios to do that. And the match race between War Admiral and Seabiscuit
Oh my gosh.
was huge.
Yeah.
So, but anything else?
You know, it's going to be interesting to see what sports does in the next few years. And as always, if I've got it completely wrong, hit me up at @RacerJoeD on Twitter. Let me know if I've screwed this up. You know, I'm willing to entertain anything. Even if it's my wife telling me to pick up milk, I'm willing to entertain that. So,
Well, women can't carry milk.
is that something your wife told you?
No, I don't let her carry milk because it's too heavy for girls. And
Oh,
I don't let her cut grass. That's too hard for girls. I don't let her carry milk. So anyway.
and she has not done anything to make you change your mind on those things.
So
has she?
anyway, one day, she grabbed the milk cartons away from me and she lifts them up in the air over her head and she goes, "Look, I'm carrying the milk."
You know, that doesn't surprise me. Again, your wife's a saint, Will.
And that brings to a close this edition of the Improbability Engine.